Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the extra mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now your hosts, Jackson Mummy and Megan Saya from Celebration Bar Review.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 329 of the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. This is Jackson. Glad to have you with us. We've just completed the wild October 5th and 6th Plan B exams and getting ready for finally Florida coming up on Tuesday, October 13th. My co-host Megan Saya is going to join me in a few minutes. We're going to talk about what happened in Monday and Tuesday's exams and what we expect coming up for next week in Florida, and just breaking down all of the news around the bar exam world this week. If this is your first time on the podcast with us, welcome. We're glad to have you with us. We come to you typically on the weekends, but we've been trying to push these episodes up just a bit because of the timing of the exams. But we produce these podcasts every week to talk about what's new in the bar exam world. And we produce the podcasts in video and audio format. So if you'd like to watch today's episode, you can go to celebrationbarreview.com/329 or find us on YouTube. And if you'd like to listen to the podcast, you can do that now on Apple Podcasts, on iHeartRadio, radio.com, Spotify, and even on Amazon Podcasts. So lots of different places to get your podcast information. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the information. Before we jump into the specifics of our discussion looking at the exams, I want to update you on a couple of things we learned after we finished recording this week's episode. We've gotten a bit more information about the performance tests, both in the Plan B test jurisdictions, the multi-state performance test, and in California's performance test. What we can tell you about the multi-state performance test is that it was a task, it was an objective task to a legal audience. This is the most common form of a performance test. It's what we thought the test would be about. And so no great surprise there, but we were really glad that was the performance test structure because I think it's the one that was most manageable for people. Now that's the performance test that was used in all of the UBE jurisdictions that gave the test on October 4th and 5th, as well as Texas and Georgia, which used the MPT. In California, we also had an objective task to a legal audience. We had a memorandum to be written to the partner having to do with actual and apparent authority of a child who gets online and overspends his limits and whether or not he can actually use mom's credit card up to the high limits. So an interesting question drawn probably from the real world. But again, pretty straightforward, and we're really pleased to see that. As you'll hear in our discussion with Megan, we're going to talk through some of the essays, at least what we heard about them, both for the UBE and for the California exam. So stick around for that information. Now, of course, we do have the Florida exam coming up on Tuesday, the 13th, and we will tell you a little bit more about that and what we think is going to be happening there and about the logistics and how the exam went. Also know that we've got a lot of you joining us on the podcast who are now planning on taking your exams in 2021. And I want to take a moment to just invite you to a special free training webinar. It's titled, Now is the Best Time to Take Your Bar Exam, How to Avoid the Crowds and the Fear. And it's really been a valuable experience for people that have gone through it. It's completely free. It takes about an hour, and we finish up at the end with a live Q&A. So it's an opportunity to ask questions about a particular strategy that we are really promoting and thinking that you should be following. In fact, many of our students in 2020 followed it, and we have had some early successes as results came out in the July exams. So we really would love to have you join us for this free webinar. We're going to look at why this is the best time to be taking the bar exam. Now, to register for this free training, you just need to click on the link. If you're watching our video, there is a link at the bottom of the page. If you're on the audio podcast, you'll see in the show notes a link there, and you can sign up and check out the free training webinar. Or if you want more information about the webinar, you can go to celebrationbarreview.com/now. So hope to see you on that webinar and look forward to showing you why now is the best time to take the bar exam. Of course, now is the time to take the Florida exam, and last week was the time to take the Plan B test, and it was a wild and crazy week, as so many of them have been. And so really want to encourage you to stick around here. Megan and I are going to break down all that news, and let's go ahead and jump right into it. I guess we should just sort of jump into it and update everybody on what's going on around the world in bar exams. So Megan, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so we finally got through the October 5th and 6th exam. So that was the UBE Plan B exam, as well as California and Texas and Georgia doing their online exams. Very exciting that we made it through. I know, congratulations if anyone's on this call today who just finished. I would actually suggest that you hop off and go take a nap or have a yummy snack. But congratulations if you're listening to this and you just finished your exam. So that leaves us with Florida. That's all we've got left in 2020 with the myriad of tests and all the different permutations of how the bar exam has looked since, July and up through October. It's been a really crazy season, but we are done with most of them now. So Jackson, do you want to talk a little bit about, we've heard trickles coming in about what the essay subjects were from some of these jurisdictions. If you want to talk a little bit, in California specifically, we had 5 essay questions there. And it's interesting because this year, since there were not physical papers with the questions on them, all we get are sort of the people giving their own takes, right, on what the subjects were. And what's funny is that while there's general agreement about some of the topics, some of them you hear a little bit of different takes on them, if you will.
Yeah, and I may not be getting this all right because I'm looking at a different sheet of paper, I think, than what I may have had earlier. But here's some of what we've heard. And Megan, feel free to correct me and jump in here if I'm missing things. We heard there was a real property essay. I did think that was a pretty high likelihood, so I'm going to take credit for that one. We heard also that there was a remedies essay that was in contracts, it sounded like, but I'm not sure of that. I'm not 100% sure of that. I didn't think remedies would be tested particularly. I didn't think it was high likelihood, but it was on the exam. What I can't tell is what the remedies were in, whether they were in contracts or property. It was not clear to me. A third essay was in criminal law. I did think this one was likely as well. So, this is just, straight up, I want to say, was it a burglary maybe? I can't remember what the crime was. Do you remember?
I don't know. I haven't seen the questions.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. I'm just going based on what people have said to me. So again, could be wrong there. The next essay apparently was in corporations. So we thought in the broad category of business associations, it wasn't terribly likely to be on the exam. That was wrong. Apparently there was a corporations question. I don't know anything about it, just that it was in corporations. And then the last exam, at least if I'm counting this correctly, was in professional responsibility. I thought this was very likely, and it was, in fact, on the exam. So, a couple of surprises. I think maybe corporations and remedies seemed a bit surprising. Other than that, I think pretty much the way we had seen the exam coming. The performance test, we've heard some different things, and honestly, we don't know exactly what it was. It was a memo of some kind. We don't know much beyond that. So if there's somebody who actually is on the call and wants to tell us, that'd be great. But that's what we know at this point. We also heard certainly that the MBE style questions, the 100 questions, I didn't get any feedback from anybody, even though the test, just ended a few hours ago. I didn't get any feedback saying there was something weird or strange or unusual about the questions. In fact, most people that I heard from seemed actually pretty refreshed. Like doing 50 questions in 90 minutes was nothing like trying to do 100 in 3 hours and then doing another 100 3 hours later. So I think that's probably pretty good. And we'll talk a little bit more about sort of the ambiance of the exam, I think, in a minute. But that's what we heard in California. Now, the other big grouping really was the uniform bar exam jurisdictions that were just doing the straight up Plan B with 3 essays. And here are the 3 essays. There did seem to be a fair amount of agreement from what we heard from people. The 3 essays were domestic relations, evidence, and partnerships. So I guess business associations was big this year. Partnerships surprises me a little bit. Evidence had been tested in the regular July 2020 exam. So that was kind of a surprise that they would test that twice. Maybe they had a surplus of evidence essay questions sitting out there. And then domestic relations, I think, is one of the easier subjects on the UBE, don't you? I mean, it's just kind of generic. I mean, what do you say about domestic relations?
Yeah, I agree. I think, everybody has their own opinions, but if I saw domestic relations, evidence, and partnerships, I'd be pretty happy as an applicant. So I don't think there was anything terribly outrageous on the UBE Plan B.
Yeah, and whatever the performance test was must have been pretty unremarkable because nobody really commented about it. So I don't know that there was a whole lot to say there. Then we had the Texas exam, of course, with, oh my God, craziness, P&E and 12 essays and MPT and the 100 multiple choice. And I honestly think the Texas students are just so tired they didn't even want to talk about it. So we may have more information for you later, but that test apparently went, as well as a super long 2 days could go. And then in Georgia, we had the 3 essays instead of 4, 30 minutes each instead of 45 minutes. And I will say, I did hear from some people who struggled with the 30 minutes, that it just was hard for them to make that switch out of the 45-minute writing to 30-minute writing, and some difficulty. They got a 90-minute period to write 3 essays. And I did hear some comments, and maybe you saw some things too, Megan, where people were really struggling to get all 3 essays done in the 90 minutes. So I think that was probably an interesting piece on the exam there. But again, 3 essays, 1 performance test, the same one that everybody took around the country except California, and then the 100 multiple choice. So a fairly short day for Georgia as well. So that's what we generally have heard around the country. I wanted to just ask you, Megan, because I know you've been following this sort of on the larger level. What did we hear from the October 5th and 6th students in terms of ExamSoft and how that process went?
Yeah, I think that the main takeaway was that while there were a lot of individual problems that people had with ExamSoft on test day, there don't seem to have been any systemic problems. So that's really good news. And we're going to talk about that a bit more in the context of Florida in a minute. But for now, just talking about the October 5th and 6th exams, there weren't any of the issues that we had seen plague places like Michigan prior, where there were just catastrophic failures. We didn't have anything like that. So that's really good news. Unfortunately, of course, there were hundreds of applicants around the country who had problems. Some people's screens went blank. Some people, it wouldn't let them upload the responses. Some people, the AI wasn't working for the monitoring. So definitely there were a lot of people who unfortunately spent a significant amount of time on the phone with ExamSoft during the exam and had to eventually withdraw from the exam, which is really, I'm so sorry. So if that was anyone who's listening to this, I do really, our hearts go out to you. Obviously, if you are one of our students, you know that we do not charge you anything for switching over to the February 2021 exam or to whenever it makes sense for you to take it. So please know that we're still here for you and you still have access to your materials and everything that you're going to need. But definitely, it's good news on the whole that there were no problems that affected an entire jurisdiction or an entire swath of applicants. So that is good news. I think you might have said, Jackson, when we spoke about this earlier, that it was really as good as could have been expected. No one was expecting perfection or anywhere close to it. This was probably the best case scenario that was really realistic.
Yeah, I think it was. A lot of individual problems are individual problems, and it's really unfortunate. I think our students did a pretty good job of being prepared, having their equipment set up, knowing what they had to do. I suspect there were a lot of people who came to the exam online not very prepared for the logistics and got just beat up by the system. We heard from very few of our students who seem to have those problems. So I'm grateful for that. But I recognize that for those students who are affected, it is a total loss. And so you have to go back and start studying. And here's the amazing thing. I mean, you and I were talking about this, Megan, earlier. We're 135 days to the February exam. Does that blow your mind? I mean,
yeah, it's very odd to be, we're not even done with all these exams yet, and we are in the final countdown for the next exam.
Yeah, and so, you got to recycle and recharge up and go. For our students, I will say, if you were in the October 5th and 6th exams, you continue to have access to all your materials with us. A special note to Texas students, because I think we want to continue to say this. Again, it seems to be a surprise to people. There will be no more Texas bar exams. You have now seen the last of those. And starting in February of 2021, that will be the uniform bar exam, which is not Texas state specific. Remember when we did this in New York and New Yorkers just couldn't get past the idea that it wasn't a New York bar exam? Oh, it's got to be a New York exam. Of course, we're testing the New York law. Well, of course you're not. So now we've got Texas. Y'all, we're going to test it. Anyway, Texas, no longer Texas. I know that you guys think you're super special, but you're not anymore. You're just uniform. So if you were in the Texas bar exam course with us, we have automatically switched you today to the uniform bar exam. So when you go to try and sign on to your Texas course, it won't be there. Please don't send us an email. Just go to the uniform bar exam. And that's what you need to study, because that's the test you're going to be taking, which means you can throw out all your Texas books. I know you're excited about that, aren't you, Megan?
Yes, I'm very happy to no longer be editing Texas books.
I know you were just learning the Duhigg doctrine. And so those are all gone and replaced with the uniform bar exam. So just be aware of that. We have done a number of videos talking about the switch to the UBE. It's a good switch. I think, a 2-day exam, an easier exam, a non-state specific exam. The scoring will still be a required score of 270 on the UBE scale. It's higher than New York at 266, but not as high as California. So I think that, it's a reasonable test to take. And you can waive your UBE score in from another jurisdiction, which is really the great part. So you could have taken the New Mexico or the Alabama UBE or the New York UBE. And if you get a 270 or better, even this year in 2020, you could waive into Texas because they're switching over. So I think that's good news. And, I feel pretty good about that.
Great. All right. So now let's turn to Florida, because I know that is on the forefront of many of your minds. That's the exam that is coming up next week after much anticipation, many date changes. I think Florida students have maybe been jerked around more than any other jurisdiction, which is saying something in a session where everyone's been jerked around. So Florida, let's talk about you. So the Florida Board of Bar Examiners did announce their backup plans. I'm going to go over these really quickly, but note that ExamSoft seemed to have gone fairly well this last week. And so yesterday and the day before, gosh, it feels like a month ago. So because of that, we don't anticipate they're going to use the backup plans, but here's what they are just in case. So the first backup would be to use LSAC's online testing platform. And the exam would be exactly the same as if it were given via ExamSoft. It's just the difference is the LSAC does the LSAT. So they've been giving the LSAT with coronavirus, they've been giving it online. So it's that platform that they feel a little bit more confident in it working. And then the second backup plan, if for some reason they felt like that wasn't feasible or wasn't going to work, would be to switch to an open book email exam. That's like what Indiana did. And they would, on October 7th, which is today, they said they'd give more details about it. I don't know if they're going to, because I don't know if they're going to feel that they need to give any more details. It's probably not going to happen. So I think that's good news, honestly, that there's not a new switch in the format, or there's no new software you have to download. You don't have to test something all over again. I think on the whole, I think it's good that it's just steady for Florida students at this point.
Yeah, I do too. I think things went well enough on Monday and Tuesday that if I'm the Florida Bar Examiners, I'm not going to jiggle the switch here. I'm just going to go ahead and go with what they've got set up. The idea of an open book exam was truly a last resort to avoid not having to give the test at all. And I'm not sure that it would have made any difference if they'd gone to the LSAT proctors versus ExamSoft proctors. It's still essentially the same AI, I think. So given the fact that things went non-catastrophically on Monday and Tuesday, I think we can assume that Florida will just go ahead and finish this out with that same structure. Now, I do know I think we've seen some comments, right, Megan, from students saying that they've had some computer problems with the Florida software when they did the mock tests. We saw that in other jurisdictions going into the October 5th and 6th tests. It seemed like most of that got resolved. So I would say if you have been having those problems, obviously you want to get proactive with ExamSoft now and try and resolve it. But I'm not hearing enough of that to make me think that the Florida examiners were going to make any switch. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, definitely. Just keep refreshing your email. Make sure that you are getting emails from the Florida bar to ensure that if they do make a switch, that you hear about it right away. If you are in our Facebook group, obviously, if there are any changes, we will post that as soon as we hear. You just need to make sure that you are paying attention just in case there are any changes at the last minute. Since, last time Florida, 2 days before the exam, changed the date of the exam. So I would not put it past the Florida examiners to make changes. At this point, I just, we'll see what happens on exam day.
Yeah, anything's possible. And I mean, and so we add to all of that meteorology.
Yes, right. So there is a hurricane. It's set to hit, I believe it's hitting Mexico right now, and it's set to kind of come up through the Gulf. It is not set to hit Florida. So good news there. It is, though, set to hit Louisiana. So the Louisiana bar is supposed to be happening on the 10th, I believe. Don't quote me on that. And they have pushed it back now until the 20th because of the hurricane. So we don't have any Louisiana bar students. However, if you are planning on taking the Florida bar and you live and you're planning on staying in Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi to take the bar, some parts of Texas as well, if you're in Eastern Texas, you should be thinking at least about whether you need to find an alternate place if you need to get out and find another place to take the bar. Obviously, you're going to need to have reliable internet service. And so if you live in a place that's going to get hit by the hurricane potentially, and you may lose power, things like that, and you don't know when it's going to be restored again, it's just a heads up. Unfortunately, we've never had bar season be the same time as hurricane season. So this is kind of a new situation here. But we saw in California with the wildfires that the California bar paid a lot of lip service to applicants who were displaced by the fires or didn't have power because of the fires and things like that. But in practice, it was mostly just a sorry, try in February. So I'm just telling you, I think you need to be aware of that if you are in one of those states and make some contingency plans for yourself.
I would say that if you are west of Tallahassee in the Panhandle, having lived in that area for a number of years, and I know that the internet service is better these days, but you remember, Megan, the great line, I think the switch at Destin is out. What? What? It's not the most reliable service down there along the Gulf Coast. And so you may want to start considering moving. And of course, with any hurricane, we know from so many years of being in the path of these storms, they change track. And they change quickly. And this storm just popped up basically again. So just be aware of it. And, to add one more thing to an already insane bar exam season, why not? I mean, how could we not have had a hurricane? It seems like it would be almost a requirement. But in any event, stay safe. That's the most important thing. Bar exam comes second. But be proactive, I think, would be my advice here.
All right, we have a couple of questions from students about the Florida exams. So first we've got, I'm looking at my notes from Jackson's Florida predictions video. It was made prior to the change in exam format. Have your thoughts changed at all with the new format about which subjects are more or less likely to be tested?
Well, it's not entirely accurate. It was made right before the August exam. So it wasn't a change in format. It was only a change in date. So given that, no, I'm not making any changes. The other thing, I hate when people call these my prediction videos. They're not. They're really a look back at the prior exam and then the trend lines, and that doesn't change. So, here we are less than a week to the Florida exam. Please don't be thinking that there's some magic pill that's going to solve all your problems about what to study. It's the same stuff you've been studying for this 8 weeks since they postponed the exam, and nothing really changes there. So if you've been following that instruction and direction, I think you're fine. And I know that there's natural anxiety because of this process. I do want to say that if you are feeling a high level of anxiety, and this was kind of interesting because I do know that we had several people in the Florida course I had suggested that they register for the Abundance for Bar Study Masterclass. That's that 90-minute masterclass that we've offered. And we got great feedback. I mean, people said, oh my God, it calmed me down. It helped me focus. It gave me a lot of resources and just felt really good. There's still time to do that. It is a 90-minute on-demand class that if you are really jittery and anxious right now for that test, and I understand why you would be, then this would be a great resolution. It would be a great solution for you. It's actionable, it's practicable. We've gotten fabulous response. I mean, everyone that's been through it says, oh my God, I'm really glad I did it. And I would encourage you to register for that and do it. Now, if you've already taken the Abundance Masterclass, it's available on permanent replay for you. Go back and watch it. I think you'll find it very helpful and very valuable. So I would really encourage everybody to do that. That's probably more valuable than listening to my trend line video about the Florida exam for the third or fourth time. I mean, how many times can I say, here's what's on the exam and you got to be ready for all of it. But I want to say this very clearly. Nothing changed between August and now except the date, right? We got a little more definition, but these were all the same subjects that we expected going in. So, I know nobody's been studying Florida domestic relations for the last 8 weeks. It's not going to be on the exam. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. And I think you should feel pretty good about being ready for the subjects that will be tested on the exam.
All right. With regard to crim law, the FBBE website identifies the possible testable subject as Florida Rules of Criminal Procedure. That seems clear enough, but do you think there will be any substantive crim law overlap, or will questions be limited entirely to procedure? In other words, during this final stretch, should we spend any time at all reviewing substantive crim law?
No, you shouldn't. Florida criminal procedure is what's always been part of the Florida multiple choice. Civ procedure, crim procedure. Typically, out of 30 questions in that broad topic, 10 went to crim, 20 went to civil procedure. That's what I expect the examiners will test. That's what their question banks exist on. They do not test the crimes. I mean, what are the elements of homicide or the elements of robbery or something else? That's not what they're testing. The multi-state was for that, and that's not where they're going on this exam. So again, don't remake the exam. I know that some of you are reaching to try and find something different or to make a problem. You don't have to make that problem. It's very straightforward. Take them at their word. Crim Pro is Crim Pro. And I think you can trust that. There's been absolutely no indication that I'm aware of that they were going to do anything differently than that. And while the Florida bar examiners have their idiosyncrasies, I guess we could say, I don't think that they are deliberately disingenuous.
All right. We have a student question in the chat box. FBBE sent out an email today to update Exemplified. On the bottom of the email, there's a link for do's and don'ts. One of the don'ts is not to leave your computer during the exam, but if memory serves correct, FBBE is allowing comfort breaks during the exam, or do they mean comfort breaks in between test segments?
I think they just mean between test segments. That's the last I had heard. Because you and I had talked about this when they first announced the comfort breaks, that it was an invitation to cheating. And I think the examiners saw our video and went, I didn't think about that. So now I don't think you can get up and leave. But here's the other thing. If you're not clear on any of this, don't take our word for it, please. We're not the experts here on the specific rules of the jurisdiction. Contact the Florida bar examiners and ask them that question and make sure that you understand. There will also be printed or published rules from the examiners and from Exemplify or ExamSoft or whatever name they're calling themselves this week. And you should be following those and reading those instructions. My understanding, my latest understanding would be there are not unlimited comfort breaks, but there are breaks between these 90-minute segments of the exam. And that's the schedule you should be looking at.
Yeah, you've got to take 100% seriously any rule that the Florida Board of Bar Examiners tells you for this test, period. Doesn't matter. They have, and I recognize it's complicated and difficult because they've changed their mind. They've changed rules. They've made rules a little bit clearer. Can't think of any time when they've loosened any rules, but they've certainly tightened some. So I know that that's difficult, but you've got to just take word for word what they are saying. And like Jackson said, if you're unclear about anything, please reach out to them now, today, and make sure that you're clear on it, because there won't be room for, wiggling out of, oh, but I got up and left in the middle of the essay and you told me 2 months ago I could. They'll fail you. So you need to make sure you understand exactly what is allowed and is not allowed.
Yeah, and kudos to that student for reading down to the do's and don'ts.
Everybody should do that. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody should. I mean, at this point, look, you want to be a lawyer? Read the fine print.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
I got nothing for you. If you won't do that, your legal career is in jeopardy.
So here's this is a question from a student, not about Florida, but I think very connected to this. Know the requirements for your jurisdiction. I had to make the last minute decision to transfer my October 2020 Texas bar exam to February 2021. The reason for doing this was twofold. One was your webinar on Wednesday, which alerted me to some issues I might have to face during the online exam. So I tried to validate what you'd mentioned by taking the full mock exam, and bingo, your analysis was spot on. Then second, since the Texas bar exam, as per the instructions, did not allow an additional screen, I didn't know that at the time I opted for the online exam. And the hectic schedule of day 2 of the exam, I decided to switch over. So I think that's a good comment from somebody in Texas, but a good note to say that you need to be really clear on what the requirements are. I don't believe Texas has allowed that multiple screen at any point. Since they went online, they have not allowed the multiple screen. So please be sure that you understand what the requirements are. Florida is the only one left as of right now doing an online exam, assuming that the February won't be online, which is a big assumption. But I think if you are in Florida, please, please, please read the do's and don'ts, read the FAQs, make sure that you really understand what's being required of you on this online exam, because it's on you. And if you get flagged, then it's too late. In many cases, it will be too late by that point to remedy it. So please check, make sure.
Yeah, good advice.
All right. And then one last question from the chat box, and this is about the exams that happened yesterday. In Georgia, with 100 MBE questions, any idea what the passing score would be on those?
Well, we talked about it last week with the scaling. We don't know any more than that. We expect that there will be some scaling added to your raw score. You'll still need a 270. That's the number that Georgia's going to work from. I think they'll just take your actual score from the 2 days and double it, because it was 3 essays. I don't know. They're going to 50% of your score will come from the written part, 50% from the multiple choice. I still think you probably needed to get about 60 raw questions correct out of 100, but we don't know. And nobody's published it, and nobody else has published their scores either, or their results, or their methodology. Now, over the next couple of months, we'll start to get some methodology, and obviously we'll see results reported from some states. I think we're not going to see California results until when? January of 2021?
January 29th.
Yeah, end of January. So 3 weeks before February. I think, and this is a question I've gotten a lot this week. This has really been interesting. I've gotten a lot of people contacting me saying, I took the exams on Monday and Tuesday. These are not our students, but people that took the exams and said, it didn't go well for me. I mean, I know it didn't go well. What do I do? And the answer is register now for the February 2021 exam in your state and start studying now. I mean, if you really don't think you did well on Monday and Tuesday, you aren't going to have the ability to wait and get your results in any jurisdiction, I think, and still have the time you need to study for the February exam. It's absolutely the case in California. I would say it would be the case in New York, and certainly in Florida. The test, I think they said, end of November, early December, they'd get their results out. That was their goal, if memory serves. That's, again, not really enough time to get ready. So, I think people are going to have to make decisions faster, and they're going to have to decide what they want to do. So I know I've got calls set up with people, today and tomorrow, and who sat for the exam earlier this week and just said, I know things didn't go well, and I'm going to just reload for February. And that's probably a wise idea if you really think you had a problem.
So Jackson, we've got about 15 minutes left, and I don't know if this will take that long, but we've got some of these comments that students gave us over the last couple weeks about what their biggest challenge is with this odd season. And I'd love to, we didn't get to all of them last time, and I would love to talk about some And even one of them is Florida specific. So I had kind of saved it
Okay.
for this week. But I think definitely it's worth for these Florida students. You're almost there. You're right at the finish line. I want to talk about some of these to recognize and acknowledge too that however you're feeling right now about the exam, you're not the only one feeling that way. And kind of how do we deal with it, right? And what do we do to push past it? So the first student said, I'm nervous about not being able to read the essays and let alone follow the steps you taught because of issues with the software. There seem to be a lot of challenges still with the technology. Can I highlight, very small font, cutting and pasting, the window where it's located being enlarged, having to scroll back and forth? It makes me cringe to leave any points on the table when I know I can do it if it's not online.
Yeah, I empathize with that as a nearly blind guy. It is a challenge for sure. But I think part of what this test is about is testing your emotional equilibrium. Just being relaxed and doing the things that we've taught you to do in the writing style, not worrying about getting all the points, but being focused on where the disputes are and writing about those. Writing in small segments of 3 paragraphs each, fact, law, application, is the key to being successful on these essays. We see it over and over and over again. I know, Megan, that you've been teaching the personal writing workshop. We didn't announce this earlier, but you're back in business. We've got the personal writing workshop for anyone that wants to do that with you. That's the 2 calls with you to have the opportunity to learn a little bit more about writing going forward. But the basics of the writing don't change. No matter what the format online is, the basics stay the same. You headline, you write 3 paragraphs, you go to the next topic, and you do the same thing. Don't make this more complicated than you have to on the Florida exam or any exam. Just doing the same thing repeatedly is what it takes to be successful here. And don't get so caught up. I mean, we were talking earlier about reading in detail for all the directions, which you do need to do. But once you've done that, don't be so fixated on the technology and the logistics that you lose sight of the real task here, which is to demonstrate your competence. And I think in talking to people yesterday and today who went through the October 5th and 6th exams, most of them felt pretty good about it. I mean, we got several comments with people who emailed us and said, it was oddly calming. I was at home. I had a comfortable chair. I was in a familiar setting. I didn't have to drive. I didn't have to go sit in the room. I didn't have to talk to other people. And so while there were some different things with logistics, there were also some really wonderful things. I slept in my own bed. I got to eat in my own kitchen. And I think, if you look at I'm not trying to be Mary Poppins here, but if you look at the positives, there are a lot of positives to online at-home exams. And I would focus more on that than on the negatives.
Yeah.
You want to add to that?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting, I told you this, Jackson, on the first day of the October 5th and 6th exams. What's funny is that the biggest, sort of affecting the most people problem that happened was in California at their in-person site. They were really late getting going and getting people registered. And so I saw photos from it, hundreds of people standing around in this hotel lobby thing. It actually looked, I'm not sure where it was, but it looked like where I took the California bar at this hotel. And you had all these people standing around in this sort of waiting atrium outside of the room because they weren't able, for whatever reason, to get people registered and in and seated. And so you had people mingling really close together, and some people wearing masks and some people not, and just all these kind of. And so it was very interesting to me that when all was said and done, the really hardest hit section for the logistics was actually the in-person exam, right? So I think it's just, there are some real, I think you're dead on that. There are some real benefits to doing the online test. So let's focus on those. If that's where you are and you're doing the online exam next week, take it. That's the given. Everyone, pretty much almost everybody's doing it. So you'll be okay. You're all in the same boat. And there are some really nice things about it, that you don't have to deal with all the other chaos that you normally do on exam day. So, yeah.
And if you're taking the exam in 2021, don't be smirking. You're probably going to take it online.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're going to in-person exams.
Yeah, I'm not sure that. Yeah, we've been saying since about March of 2020, we've been saying I'm not sure that 2021 is some magic pill of surprise. Everything's back to normal. So we'll see. We'll deal with you next week.
Yeah, right.
All right. Sometimes when I'm reading a multiple choice question, the response choices don't seem to match the way that I've learned them. I find myself trying to figure out which one is closest to how I learned. This may sound silly, but it's like the response is in a foreign language and I have to pick the correct translation.
That's really interesting to me. I thought about it. I was trying to understand what that student had in mind. And I think in part what they're trying to do is to overanalyze the question. I would rather you read a question and just fashion your own response, what you think the result's going to be. I think this will be particularly true on the Florida multiple choice, given the way they've written them over the years. Fashion what you think the response would be, and then answer according to that. I had someone that bought one of our Florida multiple choice books. They weren't in our course. They just bought the book. And it's fascinating because they bought the book and then apparently they thought with the book came a course in which they could contact me. And they were railing about how much they disliked the Florida multiple choice questions we put in. And I kept thinking to myself, oh, you poor fool. Wait till you go to the exam and you see what the questions are. These questions match the way the Florida bar is written. And they were very upset that they weren't explicit about what are the elements of, in a question. Well, that isn't what Florida does. And that isn't what the multiple choice questions do. And you have to use your intuitive knowledge, not your book knowledge, not your knowledge of rules and tests and elements, because that's not the way the questions are fashioned. And I thought maybe this student with their question today might have been trying to do too much of that hyper analytical work. And I think just pulling back a 30,000 foot view of the question instead of a 300 foot view might help them there. I don't know if that's exactly what they were talking about, but that was my sense. Did you read it that way?
Yeah, or maybe that, which I think is common, is if you're trying to do the way that we teach our students is to pause and think, okay, what would my answer be? And then look for your answer among the options, right? And I think sometimes it can throw students off, understandably, that the way that you conceived of it, it might not look exactly that way. So I think the most common example of this is if you think that it's going to be plaintiff wins because X happened. And instead, the correct answer is defendant loses because of X. And so that can trip people up, I think, oftentimes because you're looking for plaintiff wins. So don't get yourself so sort of tied in that you forget that, oh, plaintiff wins and defendant loses might mean the same thing, right? Yeah. So
that's really good. Yeah.
Sometimes that can happen. It's very understandable, but so hold that with, an open hand, a bit of understanding. The examiners may not, especially in Florida, the examiners may not have written this in the way that I would write it, but is the meaning the same? The meaning is what's important, not the exact language matching. It's the meaning. Does this outcome match the outcome that I came up with for the same reason that I came up with? That's what you're looking for. So definitely don't let that.
Yeah. Okay, folks. So you just heard wisdom there. I just got posterized. Okay. Because she's right. That's exactly what's going on. That's a great answer. Okay. Go ahead.
All right. And then our last one, which I think probably a lot of people are feeling this in Florida right now. This person's biggest challenge is anxiety over the fact that all my months of work could be moot because the Florida Board of Bar Examiners will cancel 2 days out again, and saying that I'm just feeling frightened. Like it's kind of, a little bit of PTSD, like where they sort of fool me once, fool me twice.
I will say we saw a lot of this last weekend. You and I both had, it was one of the busiest weekends of coaching that I've done in years. And I know it was for you too, with a lot of people in that sort of PTSD mode on Saturday and Sunday before the Monday, Tuesday exams, just afraid that something was going to go wrong and blow up. And of course, we've been talking for months and months and months about all of the uncertainty around this exam. And, now you and I could kind of take a breath last night. I mean, last night as the California people finally finished, I was like, it was late here in the East. I was like, oh my God, thank God it's over. And yet we've still got one more to go in Florida. It is perfectly normal to feel this way. And I don't think you should try and to spell that feeling. I mean, I think you want to use this feeling. If you've been through the Abundance Masterclass, we talk about feeling your feelings and using the power in the feelings. And there is a real power in that feeling that you can use to really energize yourself right now. Don't push the feeling away. Don't try to shut it down. It's legitimate. You're right to have been freaked out by everything that's happened. I think you'd be crazy not to have been freaked out by everything that's happened this year. And yet, I think if you embrace it and feel it and use it, it's better. I just completed an interview today with a successful student of ours who took the Alabama UBE exam. And it's a great story. You're going to love it when it comes out. She was 8 months pregnant with her second child. She had a 4-year-old at home. It was her 6th time taking the exam. They had just moved into a new house, and it's COVID, right? All of this. And she's like, I could either give up and freak out about it, or I could just embrace it and go in and have the best experience I could. And she went in and embraced it. And she said it was a great experience. And she passed. And I mean, it's a very inspiring story. I'm just teasing all of you here to listen, but you're going to really be amazed at this story. But I think it really has a truth, you know, that you can get nuts about this stuff, or you can just accept and embrace it and use the moment to show how capable you really are. Those of you in the Florida exam have been studying for months. You were ready to go 2 days before the exam. So you would literally, virtually none of you started your studies after that mid-August date. So you've had an extra 8 weeks to prepare. You're ready. You are ready. And you will do fine, but don't make yourselves nuts between now and Tuesday. Just stay the course. Do what you've been doing. Be prepared to shut it down over the weekend and just take good care of yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, so that you can present on Tuesday the very best of your work. If you do that, you're going to be fine. You really are. This is a great opportunity on the Florida exam to have a simpler test, a more straightforward test, and I think ultimately a better passing result. And we continue to see higher pass rates across the country, every jurisdiction that's reported in so far. So this is a good season to be taking the exam. And I think that's the approach I would take to it. You want to add to that?
No, I think that's great. I think it's a great place to stop. Florida students, you've got this. You are prepared. You go in and you trust that. You trust yourself. You know you did the work. Okay, so just let it flow out of you and don't panic. That is just my number one advice. Don't panic. And if you are February 2021 student, you've got tons of time. Stay on it. Stay steady. Don't slack off. Just, slow and steady wins the race here. Keep moving forward. And I think it's a great place to leave it.
Yeah. Congratulations to everybody that finished up their tests.
Yes.
Good luck to all of the Florida students. Enjoy your time off. If you're done with the exams, if you're a February 21 bar taker, let's go. And we'll see you all again on the 21st. Thanks. Thank you, Megan, for being with us.
Thanks for listening and watching the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at celebrationbarreview.com.